The shove sent Aaron stumbling into blazing light. Behind him, the gate slammed shut with finality that echoed through his bones. The arena stretched before him, a vast bowl of jagged metal under violet skies, its walls reaching toward alien stars like grasping fingers. The crowd's roar hit him like a physical blow, thousands of voices speaking in clicks, whistles, and harmonics that made his teeth ache. Fresh meat, the translation device crackled in his ear. Deathworlder scum. Aaron's hazel eyes swept the arena floor, cataloging debris, shadows, anything that might keep him breathing. His hands twitched at his sides, muscle memory from the war screaming at him to find a weapon, find cover, find a way to kill before being killed. The premature gray in his dark hair caught the arena's harsh light as he shifted his weight forward, coiled and ready. The gate opposite him groaned open. What emerged wasn't quite beast, wasn't quite machine. 8 feet of chitinous hide gleamed with metallic patches, 4 arms ending in razored claws that sparked against the arena floor. Its red eyes pulsed with artificial intelligence, scanning, cataloging, adapting. Bioengineered. Perfect. The crowd's noise faded to a whisper. Aaron's world narrowed to the creature's gait, the way it favored its left side, the slight delay in its rear optical sensors. His lips pulled back in a sharp grin. "They want a show?" he muttered, fingers flexing. "I'll give 'em a funeral." The beast lunged. Aaron dropped, rolled, came up with a shard of metal that had been masquerading as debris. The creature's claws whistled overhead, but Aaron was already moving, already thinking 3 moves ahead. The shard bit deep into synthetic muscle between armored plates. Black ichor sprayed. The beast shrieked, a sound like tearing steel, and spun faster than anything that size should move. Aaron's Deathworld reflexes saved him. He twisted away, the claws missing his throat by inches. But the creature's secondary arms caught him across the ribs, lifting him off his feet and slamming him into the arena wall. Pain exploded through his chest. Aaron's vision grayed, but his body kept moving, kept fighting. He grabbed a length of twisted rebar from the wall's base, rolled away from the creature's descending claws, and drove the makeshift spear up through its optical cluster. The beast's death scream shattered the arena's silence. It toppled backward, twitching, sparking, finally still. Aaron stood over the corpse, breathing hard, blood trickling from a dozen small wounds. He looked up at the stunned crowd, at the overlords in their elevated boxes, their translucent forms rigid with something that might have been shock. Then he spat on the arena floor and walked toward the gate. In the prisoner pits below, Juni pressed her face to the bars, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of horror and calculation. Her compact frame trembled with adrenaline as she watched Aaron disappear into the gladiator tunnels. Around her, enslaved aliens whispered in their native tongues, but she caught enough of the translations to understand their fear. "Deathworlder," one hissed, "like the stories." Juni's scarred hands gripped the bars tighter. She'd seen the arena's schematics during transport, memorized every conduit, every control junction. Her engineer's mind was already working, already planning. If Aaron could survive in there, if he could keep the crowd's attention... She turned to the alien huddled beside her, a furred biped with weary yellow eyes. "That control panel," she whispered, nodding toward the wall. "It regulates the pit barriers. If someone were to accidentally damage it..." The alien's eyes widened. "You speak of rebellion." "I speak of survival." Juni's voice was precise, technical, but underneath lay steel. "Your kind's been here how long? Decades? Centuries?" She saw the answer in his expression. "Then you know the overlords don't plan to let any of us live. That human up there, he's buying us time." Above them, the crowd was still murmuring, overlords' voices sharp with telepathic conference. Juni caught fragments of their translated speech, anomalous behavior. Tactical adaptation, threat assessment required. She smiled grimly. Aaron had done more than survive his first match. He'd made them afraid. The arena floor was being cleared, maintenance drones buzzing around the beast's corpse like metallic flies. Soon they'd send Aaron back in, pit him against something worse. But Juni would be ready. Her fingers traced the wall's conduits, mapping power flows, finding weaknesses. "Time to get to work," she murmured. In the gladiator cells, Aaron sat on a stone bench, pressing a torn rag to the worst of his wounds. His ribs ached, his hands were raw, but he was alive. More importantly, he'd learned something crucial about the arena's defenses. The beasts were smart, but they followed patterns. They adapted, but within parameters. Parameters could be exploited. A mechanical voice echoed through the cell. Gladiator designation Human 7. Prepare for combat sequence 2. Aaron's grin was sharp as broken glass. Already? You flatter me. He stood, rolled his shoulders, and cracked his knuckles. Outside, the crowd was baying for blood again, but there was something different in their voices now. Uncertainty. Fear. Good, fear was a weapon he understood. The gate began to open, spilling harsh light into his cell. Aaron walked toward it, his movements loose and predatory, every muscle ready for war. Behind him, the stone bench bore the imprint of his body, marked with blood and determination. The arena welcomed him back with its metallic embrace, and Aaron smiled like a wolf scenting prey. The second beast was bigger. Aaron sized it up as the gate ground shut behind him. 12 feet of biomechanical nightmare, centipede-like with too many legs, and a hide that shifted from organic chitin to metallic plating. Its head was a sensor cluster that tracked his movement with mechanical precision, while its tail ended in a whip-like appendage crackling with electrical discharge. "Crowd favorite," Aaron muttered, noting how the alien spectators leaned forward in anticipation. "Let's disappoint them." The creature's attack came in waves, a scuttling charge that sent sparks flying from its metal legs, followed by the electric whip that carved a smoking line across the arena floor. Aaron was already moving, his Deathworld reflexes reading the pattern, finding the gaps. He grabbed a chunk of shattered concrete and hurled it at the beast's sensor cluster. The throw went wide. The creature's whip caught him across the shoulder, electricity coursing through his body. Aaron's muscles seized, but he forced himself to keep moving, to keep thinking. The beast was fast, but it telegraphed its attacks. The whip needed time to recharge between strikes. That's when the arena floor shifted. Aaron stumbled as metal plates beneath his feet began to retract, revealing a pit lined with spinning blades. A trap, one that should have activated the moment he entered the arena. Instead, it had waited, time to catch him at his most vulnerable. Someone was watching, someone was learning. But the trap's timing was off by a fraction of a second. Aaron rolled away from the opening pit, came up with a length of cable that had been feeding power to the retraction mechanism. Sparks flew as he yanked it free, but the cable was live, humming with energy. The beast charged again. Aaron waited until the last possible moment, then swung the cable like a whip. It caught the creature across its sensor cluster, electrical feedback cascading through its systems. The beast convulsed, its mechanical components shorting out, organic parts seizing in sympathetic spasms. Aaron didn't wait for it to recover. He grabbed a jagged piece of metal from the pit's edge and drove it deep into the creature's primary neural interface. The beast collapsed in a shower of sparks and dying organic matter. The crowd's roar was different this time. Confused, worried. Aaron could hear the overlords' voices rising in sharp conference, but he was already moving toward the exit, his body screaming in protest, but his mind focused on what he'd learned. The arena wasn't just a killing ground, it was a laboratory. Below in the prisoner pits, Juni's hands worked frantically at the control panel's exposed wiring. The alien, Thek, he'd called himself, crouched beside her, his furred bulk blocking the view of the guards. Other prisoners had gathered, forming a loose circle that looked casual but provided cover. "How long?" Thek whispered. "Almost." Juni's voice was tight with concentration. Her engineer's training had taught her to read systems, to find the critical pathways. This alien technology was advanced, but it followed logical principles. And every system had vulnerabilities. Above them, the crowd's noise changed pitch. Juni glanced up to see Aaron emerging from the arena, bloodied but victorious. She'd watched his second fight through the bars, had seen him adapt, improvise, survive, but she'd also seen something else. The trap that had malfunctioned. "There," she breathed, completing her rewiring. "The next time they cycle the pit locks, we'll have a 30-second window." Thek's yellow eyes gleamed. "What do you need us to do?" "Spread the word, quietly, when the time comes." "Prisoner," a guard's voice cut through the pit's whispers. You, female, step forward! Juni's blood turned to ice. She'd been caught. But as she started to rise, Tech's massive hand settled on her shoulder. Wait, he growled. The guard wasn't looking at Juni. He was pointing at another prisoner, a scaled biped from the far corner of the pit. The creature shuffled forward, resignation in every movement. Random selection for tomorrow's entertainment, the guard announced. Feeding time. The scaled prisoner was dragged away. The remaining prisoners watched in silence, but Juni saw something new in their expressions. Anger, determination. The seeds of rebellion were taking root. Your human friend, Thek said quietly. He fights like the old stories say Deathworlders fight, but the overlords, they're not just enjoying his battles, they're studying him. Juni nodded grimly. She'd seen it too, the way the arena's systems had responded to Aaron's tactics, adapting, learning. They're not just testing his ability to survive, they're testing something else. What? Juni's dark eyes were hard as flint. How to kill us? In the gladiator cells, Aaron sat in meditation, his body still but his mind racing. The arena's systems were more sophisticated than he'd initially thought, adaptive, responsive. The traps weren't just mechanical, they were intelligent, learning from each fight, each victory. Someone was building a database of human combat behavior. Someone was preparing for war. A soft chime echoed through the cell. Aaron's eyes opened, fixed on the small slot in the wall where food was dispensed. But instead of the usual nutrition paste, he found a small piece of metal, shaped, purposeful. A lockpick. Aaron's grin was sharp as a blade. He wasn't alone down here. Someone was watching, learning, preparing. And if Juni was half as clever as he remembered from the transport ship, she was already 3 steps ahead of their captors. He palmed the lockpick and settled back against the wall, his body loose but ready. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new beasts, new tests. But tonight, in the darkness of his cell, Aaron allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The overlords thought they were the hunters. They were about to learn the difference between predator and prey. Above, in the arena master's chamber, the Overlord Commander's exoskeleton pulsed with agitation. His amber eyes studied the combat recordings, analyzing every movement, every decision the human had made. Anomalous tactical adaptation, he transmitted to his subordinates. Combat efficiency increasing beyond projected parameters. "Shall we terminate the subject?" another overlord asked. The commander's head tilted, a gesture of contemplation. "No. Continue testing, but increase security in the prisoner pits. The human's behavior suggests pack bonding tendencies. Monitor for collaborative activity. And if we find evidence of rebellion..." The commander's eyes flared brighter. "Then we accelerate the protocol. The galaxy will thank us for eliminating this threat before it spreads." In the depths of the arena complex, rebellion was already spreading. Juni's modifications had given them a foothold, Aaron's victories had given them hope, and the Overlord's cruelty had given them purpose. The stage was set for war. The third day brought rain to the arena world, acidic droplets that hissed against the metal walls and filled the air with acrid steam. Aaron stood at the bars of his cell, watching the precipitation eat small holes in the arena floor above. His body ached from the previous fights, but his mind was sharp, calculating angles and possibilities. The lockpick Juni had smuggled to him lay hidden in his palm, its metal warm from his body heat. Tonight, when the guards made their rounds, he'd put it to use. But first, he had to survive whatever fresh hell the overlords had planned for him. "Gladiator designation Human 7, the mechanical voice announced. "Prepare for psychological evaluation sequence." Aaron's jaw tightened. Not another beast, then. Something worse. The arena floor had been reconfigured, no longer the open battlefield he'd grown accustomed to, but a maze of mirrors and holograms that flickered with half-formed images. As he stepped into the labyrinth, the walls shimmered, resolving into scenes from his past. The war, the bombing of New Geneva, the screams of dying civilians. "Clever," Aaron muttered, but his voice carried a tremor he couldn't quite suppress. "Hit the trauma centers. Classic interrogation technique." But knowing the method didn't make it less effective. The holographic explosions felt real, the heat against his skin, the acrid smoke burning his lungs. His hands began to shake as phantom sounds echoed through the maze. The whistle of incoming artillery, the crack of rifles, the wet sound of a blade finding flesh. In the prisoner pits, Juni pressed her face to the bars, watching Aaron stumble through the psychological gauntlet. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she saw him falter, saw the Overlord's cruel experiment taking its toll. Around her, the other prisoners watched in silence, their alien features unreadable, but their tension palpable. "He's breaking," whispered Tech, his furred face grim. "No," Juni said firmly, "he's adapting." She'd seen Aaron during the transport, had watched him endure interrogation, torture, mind games designed to break human will. But Aaron had something the Overlords didn't understand, a Deathworlder's relationship with trauma. Where others might shatter, he crystallized, becoming harder, more focused. "Look at his hands," she told Tech. The alien squinted through the bars. Aaron's hands had stopped shaking, his breathing had steadied, and when he spoke, his voice carried through the arena's amplifiers, clear and defiant. "You want to see my nightmares?" Aaron called out to the watching Overlords. "Here's one for you." He grabbed a shard of mirror from the maze wall and carved a long gash across his palm. Blood welled up, bright red against the metal. Then he pressed his hand to the holographic wall, leaving a print that disrupted the illusion. "I dream about the day we come for you," he said, his grin sharp as broken glass, "when we tear down your pretty empire and feed your bones to the void." The holograms flickered, failed, died. The maze's walls retracted, leaving Aaron standing alone in the center of the arena, blood dripping from his hand to stain the metal floor. The crowd's roar was uncertain, confused by this display of defiance in the face of psychological torture. But in the Overlord's box, the commander's exoskeleton had darkened with something approaching fear. This wasn't how the scenario was supposed to play out. The human should have been broken, gibbering, defeated. Instead, he stood triumphant, having turned their weapon against them. Juni smiled grimly, Phase 1 complete. That night, as the arena slept, Aaron put the lockpick to work. The cell's lock was sophisticated, but not impregnable. The Overlords had grown overconfident, assuming that gladiators would be too broken to attempt escape. They'd forgotten that humans were excellent at exceeding expectations. The corridor outside his cell was dimly lit, patrolled by mechanical sentries that moved in predictable patterns. Aaron timed their routes, slipped past their sensors, and made his way to the maintenance tunnels that connected the gladiator quarters to the prisoner pits. The tunnels were narrow, barely wide enough for his shoulders, but they offered concealment and, more importantly, access to the arena's control systems. Juni had been right about the infrastructure. It was all connected, all vulnerable to someone with the right knowledge and tools. He found her in the deepest part of the pit complex, her compact form hunched over a jury-rigged terminal made from scavenged components. The glow from the makeshift screen cast sharp shadows across her face, highlighting the intensity in her dark eyes. "Took you long enough," she said without looking up. "Traffic was murder." Aaron settled beside her, his body automatically falling into a defensive crouch. "What have you found?" Juni's fingers flew across the improvised interface, calling up streams of data that scrolled past in alien script. "More than we bargained for," she said grimly. "This isn't just an arena, Aaron. It's a weapons testing facility." "Weapons?" "Biological, psychological, chemical. They're not just studying how to kill humans in single combat. They're building a comprehensive extermination protocol." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They've been doing this for years. Dozens of species, entire worlds." Aaron's blood ran cold. "How many?" 47 confirmed genocides, hundreds more in the planning stages. Juni's voice was tight with rage. "And according to this data, humanity is next on the list." The implications hit Aaron like a physical blow. The arena wasn't just entertainment, it was research. Every fight, every victory, every technique he'd developed was being cataloged, analyzed, incorporated into a galactic extinction plan. "There's more," Juni continued. "The Overlords aren't just studying individual combat. They're mapping human psychology, learning how we bond, how we organize, how we rebel. They know about us, Aaron. They know we're working together. Then we're running out of time. Worse, they're accelerating the timeline. I found deployment schedules. Weapon shipments, troop movements, target assignments. They're planning to begin systematic extermination within the next standard month. Aaron's hands clenched into fists. Then we stop them. How? We're prisoners on an alien world, surrounded by technology we barely understand, facing an empire that spans half the galaxy. Aaron's grin was sharp as a blade. The same way we've survived everything else. We adapt, we improvise, we become more dangerous than they can imagine. Juni studied his face in the terminal's glow. You have a plan. The beginning of one. They think they're studying us, learning our weaknesses, but they're making a mistake. What mistake? They're assuming we're just another species to be cataloged and eliminated. They don't understand what makes humans truly dangerous. And what's that? Aaron's eyes glittered with predatory satisfaction. We're the monsters under their beds, and we're about to prove it. Around them, in the darkness of the prisoner pits, alien voices whispered in a dozen languages. But the message was the same. Rebellion was coming, and the Deathworlders would lead the way. Above, the arena slept under alien stars, unaware that its days as a house of horrors were numbered. The overlords had thought they were creating a perfect weapon against humanity. Instead, they'd given humanity the perfect weapon against them. The revelation came buried in streams of data, hidden behind layers of encryption that Juni had spent hours unraveling. Aaron watched her face go pale as the truth emerged on her makeshift screen, scrolling past in cold clinical detail. "Protocol cleansing dawn," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the tunnel's confines. "That's what they call it." Aaron leaned closer, his eyes scanning the alien text as Juni's translation software worked overtime. Fleet deployment schedules, bioweapon specifications, target world populations. The scope was staggering, not just a war, but a systematic extermination campaign designed to wipe humanity from the galaxy forever. 47 species before us, Juni continued, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the data. Each one studied, cataloged, their weaknesses identified and exploited. The Zephyrians were too trusting. They walked into diplomatic stations that were actually gas chambers. The Kethai were too proud. They accepted challenges to single combat that were rigged from the start. And humans? Juni's eyes met his in the terminal's glow. We're too dangerous, too adaptable, too, she paused, searching for the right word, viral. They're terrified that our survival instincts will spread to other species that will unite the galaxy against them. Aaron felt something cold settle in his stomach. So they're not just planning to kill us, they're planning to do it publicly, make an example. Worse. Juni highlighted a section of the data. They're planning to turn us into a cautionary tale, broadcast the extermination across the galaxy, show what happens to species that resist their rule. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Around them, the alien infrastructure hummed with electronic whispers, carrying the Overlord's plans to every corner of their empire. Somewhere in the darkness above, the arena waited for Aaron's next performance, another data point in humanity's death sentence. How long? Aaron asked. 26 standard days until the first strike. They're targeting Earth, the colonies, the deep space stations, everything simultaneously. Juni's voice was steady, but Aaron could see the fear in her eyes. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. Aaron's hands clenched into fists. 26 days to prevent the extinction of his entire species. 26 days to turn a gladiatorial prison into a launching pad for rebellion. 26 days to prove that humanity was more than just another entry in the Overlord's database of conquered races. There's something else, Juni said quietly, something about the arena itself. She pulled up a schematic, the familiar bowl-shaped structure they'd both come to know so well, but with additional layers revealed. Hidden chambers, concealed weapon systems, monitoring stations that tracked every movement, every decision, every moment of pain or triumph. It's not just a testing ground, she explained. It's a broadcast center. Every fight, every death, every moment of human suffering, it's being transmitted across the galaxy. The Overlords are using our pain as entertainment, but they're also using it as propaganda. Aaron's vision went red around the edges. They're selling tickets to our genocide, and making a fortune doing it. This facility alone generates enough revenue to fund their military expansion for decades. Juni's fingers flew across the interface, calling up financial records, viewer statistics, betting odds. But there's a weakness here, Aaron. They're so focused on the spectacle that they've overlooked the practical defenses. What do you mean? The arena's systems are designed to contain and control individual gladiators, not to repel a coordinated assault. They've got crowd control, beast management, environmental hazards, but their security assumes compliance. They've never had to deal with a full-scale rebellion. Aaron's grin was sharp as a blade. Then it's time to give them a learning experience. Aaron, we're talking about taking on a galactic empire with a handful of prisoners and whatever weapons we can improvise. Even if we succeed here, even if we destroy this facility, it's just one node in a vast network. The extermination will continue. Not if we make sure the whole galaxy is watching. Juni's eyes widened as she understood. You want to turn their own broadcast system against them. They want to show the galaxy what happens to species that resist? Fine, let's show them what happens when Deathworlders fight back. Juni was quiet for a long moment, her mind working through the implications. It's insane, she said finally. Best kind of plan. The odds of success are astronomical. We'd need to coordinate with the other prisoners, override the arena's security systems, neutralize the guard force, and somehow take control of the broadcast center, all while staying alive long enough to get our message out. You forgot the part where we kill as many overlords as possible. Despite everything, Juni found herself smiling. That's the part I'm looking forward to most. They spent the next hour planning, their voices barely audible whispers in the tunnel's confines. Juni mapped the facility's layout, identifying key systems and potential failure points. Aaron cataloged the prisoners' strengths and weaknesses, building a mental roster of potential allies and assets. Thek's people have engineering experience, Aaron noted. They've been maintaining the arena's systems for years. They know every bolt and circuit. The Veltar in Sector 7 are natural saboteurs, and the Quindar have photographic memory. They can memorize guard rotations, system passwords, anything we need preserved. How many total? 417 sentient beings across all species. But Aaron, Juni hesitated. Most of them have been here for years, decades. They're broken, traumatized, barely surviving. Asking them to fight is asking them to risk everything they have left. Then we give them something worth fighting for. Hope? Aaron's eyes were hard as flint. Revenge. Above them, the arena's lights dimmed as the facility entered its rest cycle. But in the darkness of the maintenance tunnels, rebellion was taking shape. Plans were being made, alliances forged, weapons improvised from the very systems designed to contain them. The overlords had made a fatal error. They'd assumed that broken spirits couldn't be reforged, that despair was a permanent condition. They'd forgotten that humans, and those humans inspired, had a talent for turning suffering into strength. In 26 days, the galaxy would witness the beginning of humanity's extinction. But first, it would witness something else entirely, the birth of a revolution that would shake the foundations of the Overlord's empire. The arena had been designed to showcase humanity's death. Instead, it would become the stage for humanity's greatest performance. The show was about to begin. The fourth match was different. Aaron could feel it the moment he stepped into the arena. The crowd's energy had shifted, their alien voices carrying an undertone of anticipation that made his skin crawl. The overlords had learned from his previous victories, had adapted their approach just as he'd adapted his tactics. This time, they weren't just trying to kill him, they were trying to break him. The arena floor had been reconfigured into a perfect replica of a human city street. Familiar architecture, familiar signage, even familiar sounds playing through hidden speakers. But the details were wrong, twisted like a fever dream of home. The buildings were too tall, the angles too sharp, the shadows too deep. Psychological warfare, Aaron muttered, his eyes scanning for threats. Cute. But his voice carried a tremor he couldn't quite suppress. The street looked like New Geneva, the city where he'd grown up, the city where his unit had made their last stand during the war, the city where children had died in his arms while alien weapons turned the sky to fire. The first civilian appeared at the end of the street, a perfect holographic replica of a human woman, her face slack with terror as she stumbled toward him. Behind her came others, men and women and children, all bearing the wounds of war, all crying out for help in voices that tugged at Aaron's memories like fishhooks. "Help us," the woman pleaded, her holographic blood looking real enough to touch. "Please, you have to save us." Aaron's hands began to shake. This wasn't just a simulation, it was a recreation of his greatest failure, his deepest trauma. The overlords had dug into his psychological profile, had found the one wound that never healed, and were using it as a weapon. But as the holograms pressed closer, Aaron noticed something else. The crowd's roar had changed, becoming uncertain, confused. In the prisoner pits below, alien voices were rising in alarm. Something was wrong with the arena's systems. Uni-sabotage was working. "You want to see my nightmares?" Aaron called out, his voice carrying across the arena. "Here's the thing about nightmares. They're just memories with the lights turned off." He drew his palm across the sharp edge of a holographic building, opening a cut that bled real blood onto the fake street. The red droplets disrupted the illusion, causing the holograms to flicker and distort. And I've learned to love the dark. The street scene collapsed, revealing the arena's true nature. Metal walls, weapon ports, trap mechanisms designed to slice and burn and tear. But Aaron was already moving, his mind focused not on the psychological assault, but on the tactical situation. The overlords had shown him their hand, revealed their desperation to break him. That meant Juni's plan was working. In the prisoner pits, chaos was erupting. The power fluctuations Juni had engineered were cascading through the facility's systems, causing cell doors to malfunction, guard posts to go dark, and security protocols to fail one by one. It was subtle, designed to look like random system failures rather than coordinated sabotage, but the effect was undeniable. "Now," Juni whispered, her fingers flying across her improvised interface, "Phase 2. Thek's massive form pressed against the bars of his cell as the locks clicked open. Around him, other prisoners were emerging from their own cells, their faces showing a mixture of terror and desperate hope. They'd been broken, traumatized, reduced to mere survival, but they were still alive, still capable of rage. "Remember," Juni's voice carried through the emergency lighting, "we're not just escaping, we're taking this place apart piece by piece." The first guard patrol never saw them coming. Thek's claws tore through their armor like paper, while other prisoners swarmed the survivors with improvised weapons. The violence was sudden, brutal, desperate, the accumulated fury of years of captivity finally finding release. But Juni had planned for more than just violence. While the prisoners fought, she was already moving toward the arena's control center, her scarred hands working to override locks and access panels. Every step was calculated, every action designed to bring them closer to their ultimate goal. Above, Aaron's match was reaching its climax. The overlords had abandoned subtlety, sending waves of mechanical drones to overwhelm him through sheer numbers. But Aaron had learned to read the arena's systems, to anticipate their moves and counter them with brutal efficiency. He grabbed a severed drone arm, its weapon still functional, and turned it against its former allies. Sparks flew as metal met metal, but Aaron's Deathworld reflexes gave him the edge he needed. One by one, the drones fell, their wreckage scattered across the arena floor. "Is that all you've got?" Aaron called out to the Overlord's box, his voice carrying a mockery that made their exoskeletons darken with rage. But the commander's response was swift and merciless. The arena floor began to glow with heat, temperature rising toward levels that would cook human flesh in minutes. A simple solution to a complex problem. If Aaron couldn't be broken psychologically, he could be eliminated physically. That's when the lights went out. Emergency power flickered on, casting the arena in blood-red light. The crowd's roar turned to confusion, then to panic as explosions echoed through the facility. Through the arena's speakers, Juni's voice carried across the compound, translated into a dozen alien languages. "Attention, prisoners of the Hegemony. This is your moment. This is your chance. Rise up, fight back. Show them what happens when you cage the unconquerable." The revolution had begun. Aaron stood in the center of the arena, surrounded by the wreckage of his opponents, bathed in the crimson glow of emergency lighting. Around him, the facility shook with the sounds of battle. Guards shouting, weapons firing, the roar of improvised explosives tearing through bulkheads. But Aaron's attention was focused on the Overlord's box, where the commander stood rigid with shock and fury. Their eyes met across the arena, predator to predator, and Aaron's grin was sharp as a blade. "You wanted to study human behavior," he called out. "Here's your final lesson." He raised his hand, the one still bleeding from the psychological test, and pointed directly at the commander. The gesture was simple, unmistakable, and carried a promise that made the alien's exoskeleton pulse with fear. "We're coming for you." The arena erupted in chaos as prisoners poured onto the floor, their alien forms illuminated by the fires of rebellion. But at the center of it all stood Aaron, his human form small but unbroken, his presence a beacon of defiance that could be seen across the galaxy. The overlords had wanted to broadcast humanity's death. Instead, they were broadcasting its rebirth. The revolution had begun, and there would be no going back. The arena's transformation was complete. What had been a sterile killing ground hours before was now a battlefield, its metal walls scorched by fire, its floors littered with the wreckage of overturned vehicles and shattered weapon emplacements. The orderly rows of spectator seats had become cover for fighting prisoners, while the overlords' elevated boxes served as sniper nests for stolen weapons. Aaron stood atop the central platform, his body painted with blood and soot, coordinating the assault with military precision. Around him, the rebellion had taken on a life of its own, Thek's people using their engineering skills to turn the arena's own systems against their captors, while other species contributed their unique abilities to the growing chaos. "Juni status report," Aaron called out, his voice carrying over the sound of battle. "Control center is 60% secured," came the reply through a commandeered communication system. "But they're trying to activate the emergency." Juni's voice cut off abruptly, replaced by a burst of static. Aaron's blood ran cold. He knew what emergency meant to the overlords, a full system purge, designed to eliminate all life within the facility, prisoners and guards alike, to prevent any sensitive data from falling into enemy hands. It was a scorched earth protocol, a final act of spite. "Juni!" Aaron roared, abandoning his tactical position and leaping down into the fray. He landed amidst a group of struggling prisoners and a heavily armored overlord guard, his makeshift blade flashing. The guard fell, its chitinous armor no match for Aaron's desperate fury. "Juni, respond!" "I'm here," her voice crackled back, strained but defiant. "They've sealed the main access to the broadcast core. I'm trying to reroute power, but it's heavily shielded." "How long until purge?" A chilling pause. "Less than 5 minutes, Aaron. They're initiating the countdown." 5 minutes. 5 minutes to save not just themselves, but potentially the entire human race. Aaron's mind raced, sifting through every detail he'd observed, every weakness he'd exploited. The overlords' arrogance was their downfall. They had centralized too much power, too many critical systems. "Thek!" Aaron yelled, spotting the massive furred alien tearing through a cluster of drones near the arena's central power conduit. "Can you overload the main conduit, the one feeding the broadcast core?" Thek looked up, his yellow eyes wide with understanding. "It would mean destruction of the entire central hub. The arena would collapse." "Do it," Aaron commanded. "It's our only way in. Juni, prepare to reroute the broadcast signal the moment the shields drop. We're sending a message." Thek roared his assent, his powerful limbs already tearing at the armored plating around the conduit. Sparks flew, followed by the screech of tortured metal as he began to rip apart the massive power lines. The ground beneath them trembled. Meanwhile, Aaron fought his way towards the Overlord's command box, a singular, burning purpose in his eyes. He needed to reach the commander, to ensure their message was heard, and to deliver a final personal blow. The overlords had used his pain, his trauma, his very existence as entertainment. Now he would return the favor. He scaled the side of the command box using handholds he'd memorized from countless hours of observation. Guards swarmed him, but Aaron moved with a brutal efficiency born of desperation. He was a whirlwind of motion, a blur of strikes and parries, each movement precise and deadly. He was no longer just a gladiator. He was an avenging angel, a Deathworlder unleashed. He burst into the command box, finding the Overlord Commander surrounded by a handful of elite guards, their exoskeletons pulsing with frantic energy. The commander's amber eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed with cold fury. "You, human!" the commander hissed, its voice a telepathic shriek that vibrated in Aaron's skull. "You have doomed us all. The purge will activate. No one survives." "Wrong," Aaron snarled, his voice raw but resolute. "We survive. You don't." He lunged, ignoring the guards, his focus solely on the commander. The elite guards moved to intercept, their energy weapons humming, but Aaron was faster. He twisted, dodged, and used their own momentum against them, turning their attacks into openings. One guard stumbled, another fell, and Aaron was through. He slammed into the commander, his full weight driving the alien back against the main console. The commander's exoskeleton buckled, its amber eyes flaring with pain and shock. Aaron grabbed the alien's head, forcing its gaze towards the main screen, which now displayed a rapidly ticking countdown. 0130. "Look at it," Aaron growled, pressing his bloodied hand against the commander's faceplate. "Look at the end of your empire." Below, the arena shook violently as Thek succeeded in his task. A blinding flash of light erupted from the central conduit, followed by a deafening roar. The arena's main power grid flickered, then died, plunging the entire complex into darkness, save for the emergency lights. The shields around the broadcast core, deprived of power, shimmered and vanished. "Juni, now!" Aaron yelled into his comms, even as the commander struggled in his grasp. In the control center, Juni's fingers flew across her improvised interface. The moment the shields dropped, she slammed her hand down on a salvaged control panel, rerouting the arena's primary broadcast signal. The overlords had built this network to transmit their propaganda, their spectacles of death. Now, it would transmit something else entirely. Across the galaxy, billions of sentient beings tuned into the arena's live feed for their daily dose of Deathworlder entertainment suddenly saw their screens go black. Then, a new image flickered into existence. It was Aaron, bloodied, bruised, but standing defiant in the Overlord's command box, the struggling commander held firmly in his grasp. Behind him, the arena was a maelstrom of fire and chaos, alien prisoners fighting for their freedom, their faces etched with a desperate, unyielding hope. And then Juni's voice, amplified and translated into every known galactic language, boomed across the network. "For too long, the Hegemony has ruled through fear and genocide," she began, her voice clear and strong despite the chaos. "They have enslaved entire species, destroyed countless worlds, and planned the systematic extermination of humanity. They called us monsters, they called us a threat, and they were right." Aaron tightened his grip on the commander, forcing the alien to face the camera to witness its own downfall. "You wanted to see what happens when you cage the unconquerable?" Juni's voice continued, resonating with a righteous fury. "You wanted to make an example of us? Here is your example." The broadcast then cut to a montage of images Juni had prepared. The Overlord's hidden data, the 47 confirmed genocides, the schematics for Protocol Cleansing Dawn, the chilling details of humanity's planned extinction. It showed the faces of the enslaved species, the suffering in the prisoner pits, the cold, calculating cruelty of the overlords. Then it returned to Aaron, who now held a salvaged energy weapon to the commander's head. "This is not just a rebellion," Aaron's voice, raw and filled with grim determination, joined Juni's on the broadcast. "This is a declaration. To every species enslaved by the hegemony, to every world threatened by their tyranny, rise up, fight back. We are humanity, and we are proof that Deathworlds breed monsters, and we are coming for you." With a final decisive movement, Aaron pulled the trigger. The energy weapon discharged, a blinding flash that consumed the Overlord Commander. The image on the galactic broadcast flickered, then stabilized, showing the commander's smoldering exoskeleton, a stark symbol of defiance. The arena groaned, its structural integrity failing. The purge countdown reached 0, but the system, already crippled by Thek's overload and Juni's rerouting, merely sputtered, unable to complete its deadly command. The facility began to collapse around them, a symphony of tearing metal and exploding conduits. "Aaron, we have to go," Juni screamed through the comms. "The escape pods, they're still functional." Aaron nodded, turning from the ruined console. The remaining elite guards, stunned by the commander's death and the broadcast, were quickly overwhelmed by the surging tide of liberated prisoners. The revolution was not just contained within the arena, it had been unleashed upon the galaxy. He met Juni at the main escape hatch, Thek, and a dozen other species already waiting. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning electronics, but a fierce light burned in the eyes of every liberated prisoner. They were no longer just survivors, they were revolutionaries. "Where to now, Deathworlder?" Thek rumbled, a wide, toothy grin on his furred face. Aaron looked back at the collapsing arena, at the burning symbol of the Overlord's hubris. "To every corner of this galaxy," he said, his voice filled with a quiet, dangerous promise. "To every world they've touched, we're going to show them what true monsters are." The escape pods launched, streaking away from the dying arena, a beacon of defiance against the vast, oppressive darkness of the Hegemony. The broadcast, now repeating Juni and Aaron's message on a loop, spread like wildfire across the stars, igniting the embers of rebellion on countless worlds. The Overlords had wanted to make humanity a cautionary tale. Instead, they had forged a legend. Humanity, the Deathworlders, had not just survived, they had become the catalyst for a galactic revolution. The war had just begun, but this time, humanity wasn't fighting for survival. They were fighting for freedom, for justice, and for the right to be the monsters under the Overlord's beds forever. And as the arena exploded behind them, a new dawn broke across the galaxy, a dawn painted in the defiant colors of human grit and alien hope.